What up? What up? Welcome to I Just Want to Know. I'm Alan Kay.
Karmel Humphrey.
And happy Friday, first of all. And today's episode is about education. What stemmed about this episode, Karmel, is that recently we have they're taking the PISA exam. The PISA, PISA,
I like pizza.
PISA, PISA.
Okay.
But pretty much it's a standardized test that almost all 15-year-olds take.
All right.
In 65 first world countries. And right now, the top 5 are ironically Asian countries. Of course we are.
Of course.
Finland's number 6, who have recently, as of late, they were actually dominating.
Yes.
But then they recently took 6th. And America is right at the middle at 32nd. So despite
out of how many
out of
countries?
65.
Okay, right.
65. I think it's 65 first world countries is what they're saying. So,
First world countries.
Right.
Okay.
So despite spending the 5th most amount of money towards our public education, right? We rank in the middle of the pack of that. So, Karmel, what are your thoughts on this? And where do you think we should go?
Wow. So, I mean, that's the top 5 are Asian countries.
Top 5 are Asian countries.
It's also because they put they put more emphasis on education. There's a premium on it. It's very important to us. It's we spend more money on defense than education. Even though we still spend a lot on it, we're putting a lot more money into fighting wars and putting people in prison than putting people through college. In Finland, like I think I brought this up on a previous episode about the documentary "Where Do We Invade Next" by Michael Moore. He talks about Finland's education. It's very different than ours. The way they teach their kids and train their kids and educate their kids. I think we're also sometimes we're kind of archaic in the way we do it, and then we get so way out there with like the new math, what is it, Common Core and all that stuff, and just there's so much. It's not catered to really learning. I think it's catered towards agendas and people putting money into different things, and I don't think it's really helping our kids.
Okay. Yeah, I like to harp on the like we're talking about the first 5 ones being Asian. It used to be Finland, but then like Singapore, China, and I forgot what the other 3 are. That pretty much took over. But it's not. I mean, it's not by a large margin. It's obviously the rank for a reason. But I think the one interesting thing that Asian cultures have with regards to their schooling, and we talked about this before, is that the very first 4 years that they're in school is all about etiquette. Etiquette. Just like you were saying, like I think you pretty much harped on value of education, right? Whereas like we as soon as you get to kindergarten and first grade, you start putting them through ABCs, giving them homework. And I'm not saying a strenuous amount of homework, but when it comes down to a culture that says, hey, no, this is how you're going to behave in class. This is how you behave amongst everybody else. That's where as soon as you start that foundation, now everything else that's being taught has way more value because you teach these students value.
Sure.
Right? And then on top of that, the cultural perspective of teachers is the same prestige that we value doctors, lawyers, all those other, what we consider to be amazing people, surgeons and things like that. In those Asian cultures, they also value teachers at the same level.
Sure.
Right? So they actually take a big pride in what they do. Naturally, when you have a pride of what you're doing, you're going to put more emphasis on it because you actually care.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I wonder, because we both have kids and, and I obviously don't want my kids to be deficient in any type of learning anything. I wonder what your thoughts are on what we can do to potentially improve. I mean, do you think it's a culture shift that we need to make? I think you kind of hit on the head when you said we put more money in our defense. I mean, that's a different topic. We kind of did talk about that before.
Yeah. I think it's a personal thing. Like I think each parent needs to take an approach that's specific and unique toward their kid. That's been my approach. My kids were homeschooled for a period of time. They went to charter school for a small period of time, and now they're in public school. So they've kind of gotten, other than like a rich, prestigious private school, which actually my son did go to for a while. So they've kind of all gotten different types of education you can get out there. But one thing they've also gotten is me and my input. I'm very, very, very involved in them learning, not just reading, writing, and arithmetic, but like common sense, street knowledge, like logic and thinking, being open. My daughter the other day, she asked me a great question. She said, "Is there anyone out there with $1 trillion?" I said, "No." She said, "Well, no, I know. I heard we just paid $1 trillion for something, something, something." I said, "Well, yeah, that's our government probably paid that much money, but not one person has that. There's probably like 5 or 6 billionaires who have probably $100 to $200 billion that are our 5 richest people that kind of always revolve. It's like Bezos one day, it's Bill Gates. Someone's always the top.
Right.
But they're about combined, maybe those 5 or 6 people have $1 trillion.
Right.
So she said, "Well, don't we just make money anyway? We just print money." And I'm like, yeah. And yeah, we do. We just make money. Like, honestly, it's just numbers in a computer. We just punch, and here's how much money you have. Honestly, it used to be backed by gold. And I got into this long story about what money really is and currency and all that stuff. But that teaching and me having that question, and then me being prompted to teach her, is something she's not going to get in school. In school, they're going to teach her just the basics of economics. Here's, supply and demand, yada, 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 but not understanding how people become rich, or like how someone can, how you make money off real estate, or what's this guy doing, and like teaching her the difference between a business owner and an entrepreneur. So pretty much like applicability of this education it needs to be taught more than anything else. 100%. And that's on the parents.
Right. And you know what? So this is the thing. And oh my God, I mean, ever since we started researching this topic, I mean, I hear it very often. Education system needs to change. Education system needs to change. And although, good job, you could point out, all these different things, right? I don't hear one person actually giving like, hey, this is how we can make a change. We point to the finished thing. So, and that's another thing. So I don't exactly always, look into the stats way too much. For example, right? And I'm going to give you more stats to kind of contradict some other stats. Right?
Okay. All right.
So although we're in the middle of the, about 32nd, 33rd in the middle of that thing, right? The one thing that people forget, that Finland, their immigration students thing is 40-1. Right. And I'm going to use Finland as our example right now. Okay. So there's 40-1 people that are originally from Finland and then towards immigrants. So, and you know what the American student population ratio is? 5-1.
Wow.
So when you got students in here, for every 6 student, right, that comes in and now all of a sudden has to take a standardized test on the language that they're not originally from, naturally they're going to have more difficulty taking it. Right. Of course. That's a kind of a disadvantage as well. I think another thing that people realize, because I've heard the argument of, well, you can't, judge a fish on his ability to climb a wall, right? I've heard that reference before. But then I do think there's this one of two things that I will say. I will agree saying that, excuse me, that if you're going to like change the education curricula for somebody to learn individually, that I do feel like the curriculum needs to change. It does need to be more individualized towards a kid's talent that they have demonstrated, rather than just a standardized thing. But you and I have discussed this before. The majority of it all depends on what school is predicated towards. Are we predicating school towards actually educating them? Or are we getting them ready for the real world? Right?
Yeah.
And which I will say right now that if we're going to literally teach people how to actually interact and be communal and act in a workforce, be part of a unit division and develop cohesion, there is no other structure that teaches you, hey, this is the baseline for which you're going to get taught, right? Because if you and I were an engineer in some company, our baseline for what we'd be judged on is the same route. It wouldn't be, hey, Karmel's better at reaching higher spots than Alan because Alan's short, Karmel's taller. It would be, how do they do their work? And there's no other fundamental for that, right? On top of that, right, what is the basic work schedule? Monday 9 to 5, right? The schools are a little bit different. We're going to go into that. We're going to go into school things and sleep schedules, mind you, and then this can be another interesting topic. But there's nothing more that's other. Hey, Monday through Friday 9 to 5. It's getting these kids geared towards regular work and everything like that. On top of that, your business owners, your entrepreneurs that we talked about, right? Those are usually people that are an exception to society more than they are the norm. And that's why when you get those people that are given the same information, a lot of other people retain it a little bit more, demonstrate it out a little bit more. And that's why you got these kids that are in higher classes after they demonstrated the baseline isn't good enough for them. And so I'm in this weird debacle in between, should we change it based on, educating them, or we should change it based on the work community? And I think we need to, if we're going to predicate it towards the work system and the working class, then I think it should stay the same. But when it comes to actually evolving humanity and getting them to be smarter, so to speak, and apply their skills to individuality, then I think that we do need to change it.
So then my question is, if we're looking at that question, I would even go back a step before that and look at this PISA, whatever it's the standard. The PISA. Like, what is the goal of that?
Right.
Like, because why does that standard say that our education system is not that great? Who's to say that it's not? Because your test says we score here. What if we create a test that it's built around what we're good at? Then we would score the highest. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So it's funny because like standardized testing, it's like, well, that's not what we do.
Right.
You know, for me, I go to what you were just alluding to in terms of like work schedule. Like, are we creating a assembly line of workers versus are we creating people to be Elon Musks? You know, for the most part, I think we're creating workers. Right. Like you said, there's a 9 to 5 schedule. School's 8 to 3. It's like, it's literally the same thing, and it's Monday through Friday.
Right.
And I've always taught my kids to not think like workers. Like, when you're in class, listen to what the teacher's saying, understand there's a difference between truth and facts. And I've had a couple of them ask teachers in class about, you know, explain this and that. Like, we were having a discussion about space. And my daughter was asking about, you know, flat earth and this and that and da-da-da. I said, here's the thing. No one really knows what's out there. No one knows.
I think the world is round. No, I think the earth is...
You think the world is round.
I mean, everything
but
from space...
how do you actually know?
Well, because of the photos from space.
There you go. That's the same answer I've gotten from every single person I've asked is a photo.
Okay.
What does that tell you?
That the earth is round.
It tells you it's a photo.
So now it's a conspiracy.
No, see, and then that's the next thing. So here's my point. That's what I'm going to get to, is we are all conditioned to think that if it's against what I've always been taught, it's a conspiracy. It's a photo. I can literally get on Photoshop and Illustrator and make any NASA photo. Do you disagree with that?
Not really.
I could do that right now. I'm not that good at it, but I can make a NASA, or I can take a photo someone made and just put NASA on the bottom and people would believe it. Oh my God, look at space and all these millions of galaxies. I have no idea.
Okay.
But my point is, I don't care. When I'm driving down the 405, I don't really care about a galaxy, but it's educational. Okay, we'll learn it, fine. But what I teach my kids is don't be afraid to ask.
Oh,
if you're sitting there thinking, I don't understand why you would say that, because my daughter said, it doesn't seem like the earth is round. Like, it feels flat. I said, well, you know what? 2,000 years ago, that's what they were taught. They were taught the world was flat. This was a common thing until Galileo and some other guys said, I don't know, maybe it's round. Okay, cool. But when you observe what's around you, it might feel flat. And then I taught my youngest daughter what Occam's razor is, which is the philosophy that, you know, the simplest explanation is probably the one that's right. I said, if I'm looking around, it looks flat to me. Maybe it's flat. I said, I don't know, but don't be afraid to ask. And I think that's one thing we don't do in school is allow kids to ask and think. They shut all that down. But kids being like, oh, I don't understand this, miss. That kid's unruly. He's got ADD. Give him some Ritalin. He's crazy. You know,
I found it more peculiar because it seems like more and more these days that we diagnose students with this more and more thing, right?
Yes.
So another stat that I found out as of late. So the American population, the student ratio, 15 to 20% are actually considered to be dyslexic, which is twice as high as anybody else of those PISA school things. I'm going to keep referencing PISA because there's like, I mean, until somebody finds another metric to
create one,
create one, right? And then in all ways, so PISA goes over reading, math, and science, right? And in all reality, if you think about how humanity is formed in everything from architecture and everything fundamental of development, it starts at those three things, in my opinion. Okay. You know, so I mean, I feel like that is a good measure of which that, you know, everything else should be standardized. So now to go back in the whole thing, and I'm going to contradict myself so many because, like I said, I'm in the middle of a lot of things.
Sure.
Right? Because when we talk about like topics of which, you know, students should learn, you know, like we said, you can't judge a fish by his ability to climb a wall, or so to speak. But then again, if you're to apply that towards and this is kind of like what I'm against is like, I think we're more and more in a culture these days where we're not understanding how to be like I said, communal. We don't know how to interact with others. And if we teach students at that age to like, hey, well, and you need to individualize your own plan. You need to individualize this, and this. By the time you get to a spot where you have to actually contribute, like, and you're expected to contribute uniformly throughout in a division or in a workspace or anything like that, like, I feel like from a behavioral standpoint, they won't know how to interact because they're taught their entire time. Well, no, because you need to individualize this for yourself. I mean, and I can, in my experience, my experience with the Navy, so to speak, where divisional and unit cohesion is everything. Like, people that individualize anything for themselves always get ousted. They never get work. Production goes down drastically. People don't know how to play their role in certain things. And in general, sometimes, I mean, I feel like that's one of the biggest things that people should learn at an early age, that, hey, you're not going to be good at everything, and accept it. Understand how to learn with that adversity.
I agree with that. And I think when you mentioned earlier about being stuck in the middle, I think that's a lot of where we see, like, on one hand, there's a lot of participation trophies in sports.
Oh my God, too many.
Too many. So everyone gets to play, but then on the same token, we also champion the valedictorian. We champion the kid who's the greatest in academics, but like, we don't give them all participation valedictorian trophies. Like, you graduate maybe,
right?
But, so like, I think athletics and team sports is another thing we're losing a lot of, and I think that's why a lot of kids have issues with being able to be communal and work in a team and have camaraderie. You mentioned dyslexia. And my daughter's dyslexic.
Yeah, so is my older daughter, by the way.
Okay.
It's crazy, right?
It's honestly, I hate the term because it has a negative connotation, but most of our like brilliant minds were all dyslexic.
Right.
Some of the greatest people in this, Muhammad Ali to Richard Branson to Einstein, and there's a whole, if you go on Wikipedia and look it up, the list is exhaustive of people that are dyslexic. And the way I explain it to people is, it's not that they just flip letters backwards or just put numbers weird. It's they literally think in 64-bit and we're in 32-bit. Like, you go to class and like, my daughter cannot sit there and listen to each instruction. Right. But if you say, hey, here's how you make this, and just pour it on her, she'll do it.
Right.
She just thinks in big blocks. Like, she'll just knock it out. She can't handle this piecing things together. That's just not her brain. She thinks really fast.
Right.
And we were scared to put her from a charter school where she was getting a lot of aid and a lot of assistance and all that, to a public school didn't have as much, because you're not in a regular forum with regular kids. She still gets assistance, but I said, look, my daughter's very competitive, right? I think she's going to thrive in that atmosphere. Right. Sure enough, she did. She just took to it, because dyslexics also know how to cope. And since their brain works faster, they actually just learn how to cope and do things usually faster than everyone else.
Right.
So I think it's really bad. And then she's looked at as having a disability. Right. I'm like, honestly, she's better than the rest of the kids.
You know what? You know what? I like how you emphasize that, because like I said, my older daughter's dyslexic. My younger daughter is the scholastic brains. Like, my younger daughter's straight A's. She already has a scholarship for college, and she's barely 11. Wow. My older daughter is dyslexic. She's not as good on the scholastic things, but she's like already designing outfits. If you ever see her interact with people gravitate towards her on a regular basis. And that in itself is priceless as itself. And I'm glad you said the disability thing, because I think we're in such a phase where we got to diagnose people on a regular basis. And because it has a negative connotation, I think a lot of people, as soon as they get diagnosed with something, now give themselves an excuse to not reach their potential and reach their goal. And that is a huge cultural shift we need to make. Like, hey, just because you have dyslexia, right? You still have the rest of your life to live, and in all reality, if I was dyslexic and I was dyslexic my entire life, right? What else do I know other than being dyslexic? Exactly. And I can do one of two things. Either A, I can be like, I'm dyslexic, I'm not going to learn anything. Or B, you know what? If I really want to learn and get ahead, this is what I got to deal with. Because there's no, like you said, there's no handicaps in life.
Yeah.
If you don't.
That's the main reason why I said to put her in public school, because one, she's not going to get all these assistants out in the real world. She has a regular job at Chase or wherever. No one's going to be sitting there teaching her how to count the money. But then at the same time, as you mentioned, your daughter is a designer. My daughter is a brilliant singer and can draw, and she tells crazy stories. And so, like, when you mentioned that the standardized testing in reading, writing, and math, but why not music? You know what I'm saying? Why not art? Because you can't really quantify those things. But we love Picasso. We love Mozart. We love Whitney Houston. We love, like, I think of all the things in this world, art is the one thing that actually brings us together. If someone sings a song in Japanese, if it's beautiful, I don't care what they're saying. I'm just drawn in by the emotion, the sound. Like, that's, if you hear African tribal music playing, you cannot sit still. It just drives you. You just want to move. So I'm like, but they don't use that in standardized testing. So how do you know what a person's greatness is if you're teaching or if you're testing them in something that they're not great at?
Well, I think that's why we should maintain a balance of being like, hey, this is like, just like anything else, right? Like we're taught like that income and everything is your value to humanity. But again, I've seen people that, you know, like Mother Teresa didn't make really a dime in her life and just served people an entire life. And so again, I think that's where we can honestly teach between the difference of appreciation and value and money, right? And really get back down to principles of teaching anything else.
Yeah. And in that video or the documentary I mentioned earlier, Where Do We Invade Next, Michael Moore talks about that, how in Europe they value trade more than degrees.
Right.
Like your ability to make, you know, tables or shoes or watches or whatever, like in your community, in your village or whatever, that's how you survive. And they make a great living because everyone goes to you for that thing.
Right.
So then your value is determined by that, your income, your place in your society. And it makes perfect sense. Like I'm the best fabric maker in town. Everyone comes to me for their linens. Right. Okay, cool. And so, and everyone in that economy supports each other. We don't have that here.
Well, I think that goes back to the cultural thing we're talking about, where like they value community. They value contributing for the greater good of everybody else.
Yeah.
I don't want to say like socialism, but it kind of isn't like that in a sense, right?
Yeah, in its own way. It's
right.
Yeah.
And I think I'm glad you brought up college. I don't want to get too much into university and college and everything like that, but I think there's way too much emphasis on college these days. You know, you got like degrees in basket weaving, or I know I'm gonna piss off some people, like social science or poli-sci or anything like that, liberal arts or things like that, right? And in all reality, what contribution do they really have? You know, I mean, I do agree that there's a need for education, extended education of certain things, you know, engineering, law school, because how else are you going to really learn law to an extent, but in doctors and things like that, medical and everything. But in all reality, universities have not only created all these degrees that don't matter, but they pushed it saying that everybody needs it. And I'm glad you brought up trade, because now you see more and more companies that are actually looking for real skills than they are for degrees. Because in all reality, degrees just means that you went to college, you didn't get too drunk, and you still finished your degree.
That's it.
You're
good at doing homework.
You're good at doing homework, right?
That's it.
And it, not mind you, it does have some value. It really does.
Work ethic, and you know, you can stick to itiveness. But then, like, I know people who have political science degrees working at Costco. It's like, what?
Right. And
like, why? What are you doing there?
Right.
You know?
Right,
but at the end of the day, what do you really do with that?
What are you really doing with it? Right.
Yeah.
And that was the one thing. Like, I remember, because there's a lot of people like, oh, hey, you know, you joined the military, you could have done something better. But like, dude, I went for nuclear engineering, right? And like, so by the time I got out, I still don't have my college degree. That's me being lazy. I'm not gonna lie. I might just not like more money, whatever. But like, if you were to put my resume against somebody who has a master's degree in engineering, I'm gonna get that job 24/7, because I've demonstrated already enough for at least 10 years plus that I can operate a nuclear reactor, which in value is significantly more than anything else that somebody said with a piece of degree can do. Right.
I can submit a paper.
Right. Yeah. And I hate that, because I mean that's how it used to be. And like back in the day, not too many people had degrees, so you try to look for the exception. And so now you find, you know, now everybody has a degree and nobody has experience. And it's like, and on top of that, people are so focused on getting their grades, try to get scholarships to college, that a lot of these students that are very exceptionally performing students get zero work experience by the time they get into school. So their real experience is very, very limited. And
very limited.
Man, if there's anything that we can really teach kids these days, is not only can you perform at your primary job, so to speak, which is school, but you can also do something secondary and learn so much more.
Yeah, definitely.
And be well-rounded and well-versed as a person.
I think schools and universities, definitely our state schools, because we can actually enforce this, should be somehow or another lining up parallel work experience with their curriculum, with the courses they're going to do. Like, there's no reason why a kid should not be learning the trade that they're studying for at the same time that they're studying. And somehow or another use that to, I mean, even if the school has a way of what's what we're looking for. Part of the cost of going to school is you working in your trade for the school. I mean, it makes sense.
That could work.
Yeah,
right.
It makes sense if you're doing a medical degree or a law degree or something, or engineering. I'm sure the school has some things that you can do. And so that's part of your tuition goes back to you because you're working and you get work experience.
Right.
How hard is that?
Especially for universities, and especially with student loan debt being at $1.3 trillion.
Crazy money.
And I just found out that schools are actually all tax free. They're all, because they're considered to be providing back, but at the rate that students are, because we're in this epidemic where these students, not only they get zero work experience, they put themselves in hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt by the time they even hit the work market, but then they don't have any experience. And then works are like, hey, you know, the majority of jobs these days, if you look at them, like you have to have a bachelor's degree and 10 years of experience. And it's like these kids are 22,
right.
23. And then there's the other epidemic of saying, you know, the stigma is at 18, you're going to pick a 4-year degree, right? And you're going to do that for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Which is very impractical.
Yeah.
You know, because I mean, I don't know how you were between the ages of 18 and 22, but Alan Kay at 18 and Alan Kay at 22 are two completely different people.
Easily.
And I feel like that's the biggest change I've ever had with regards to my perspective in life and everything. And then so now let's say I have this engineering degree at 22, 23. And I don't want to be an engineer anymore because that's the natural process of life.
I've had this conversation with the guy who's about 23, 24. He just got a good job. I think he's a civil engineer, and he's done. He got his degree, got his master's,
right.
Got a good job. He's done.
Right.
You can just see it on him. I'm like, well, what do you want to do? He's like, photography.
Yeah, I don't want to do this at all.
I don't want to do this.
Right. But you know what's crazy about that? So the most recent statistic of students actually going into, right after finishing a 4-year degree and going into that respective job field is only at 15%. 15%.
Wow.
Which only emphasizes that much more. Oh my God. When I was
crazy.
A recruiter in the Navy, I used to emphasize that to kids, being like, hey, I'm not saying the military is for you, but it's not a bad way to develop some type of work skills, learn more about yourself as a person, and then go into school without getting into debt, and then going from there, because it's not a bad approach.
Makes way more sense.
But to go back into this, to get away from the whole college thing, I think that we would find more value to these students, or giving more value to the students, if we made high schools better. Because back in the day, it used to be you will learn enough in high school, or at least be able to work enough to the point where you can actually go to the real world and then develop your trade and learn from the bottom and go from there. And I feel like that's what we need to get back to. And we need to not only get back to that, but also change ways in which we can enhance learning and teach students, hey, you know what? Learning is a fun process. It's not like it shouldn't be a chore.
It shouldn't be.
So,
but a lot of it is again, like Finland, their school days are shorter.
Their school days are shorter. I was just gonna, man, I told you, I'm all about these statistics. And I love statistics.
Well, there you go.
So,
Segue.
So we found out that those Asian countries, Japan, Korea, China. Oh, Korea was one of them. I forgot to mention Korea.
Okay.
South Korea.
Who was number one?
So it was Singapore. Singapore was number one.
Okay.
And then it was China, then South Korea.
Okay. And
then I forgot which one in there. But anyways, so on average, the average student, all the way up until they're through high school, spends 150 hours less throughout the school year than the average American student, right? And so also with that being said, that the average American student has a 10-week summer break, and these other ones have 6 weeks, right? So if you put that into basic kind of math, which means that their school days are shorter and they're not as withdrawn from the school process as much as possible, right?
Sure.
I mean, I'm pretty sure you've taken like weeks off of work, months off of work, and then coming back like, oh my God, this shit sucks.
Right.
I'm not adjusted to it. Right.
Yeah.
And the same thing happens with students, except, when you're not in the groove of it for 2.5 months straight, you become more complacent than you are anything else.
Easily.
Obviously 6 weeks, you're going to be a little bit complacent, but not as much. And especially when you're programmed to have shorter school days. Right.
Yeah.
So another thing, right? So a lot of the Asian and Finland, what they've both adopted is closer to a 45-15 schedule. So 45 minutes of study and 15 minutes of break, right? Because the human mind in general, you talk to a student raging hormones, going through puberty, has a attention span of a squirrel, and all of a sudden you try to talk to him for an hour straight. Good luck, right? Yeah. It's just like anything else, right? If I were to tell you 26 random letters, right, and tell you to write them A to B or A to whatever the heck it is, right? You'd be like, you might get the first one, you might get the last one, but the middle in between is whatever. Yeah. But if I give you 4 at a time, 4 at a time, 4 at a time, you'll retain everything. And that's what these guys have learned, is that if we stick to that and do it there. Another thing, right? Another crazier thing. Not only do they have shorter school days, but they start later. They start later. And though this is why. So studies have shown, don't tell me why I got into a sleep study thing, but I did. Okay. So the average teen develops their natural melatonin at 11 o'clock at night. That's about the average teen, right? Okay. So which means that when we wake them up at 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock to go to school, it's the adult equivalent of waking them at 4 or 3 o'clock to go to work. And I mean, I don't know if you're woken up at 3 or 4 o'clock to ever go to work or do anything. Yeah. I do that to go to the gym, but oh my God, I need that pre-workout like crazy before I go. That's exactly how we sound.
At one shift, 1 week at a job I used to work, it was around that time. I had no idea what time it was.
Right. So now could you imagine now school students now, because, we're supposed to teach them there, obviously a teen's body's developing at an astounding different rate than adults are, of course, because our bodies physically are developed. So imagine like now we're putting them into a sleep deprivation thing. And it's been found that only 1 in 10 American students are actually getting the proper sleep. Wow. So now, to enhance that, right? And they've shown that if you were to move the schools starting at 9:30, 9 o'clock instead, and that's actually what the Department of Health and everything actually recommends for students to actually start their day at that time. Wow. Right? Not only do they get the more recommended 8 to 10 hours sleep, which is more prevalent in those students' lives, but that helps them develop more of their cerebral cortex so they can actually learn more. That develops their more learning adaptation of anything. So not only did they show that, but they showed that that test scores for communities that do actually convert over to that, they improve their math, science, and reading scores by 2 to 3%. So to put that in perspective, that's actually reducing the student to teacher ratio to 1/3. That's the same effect that it has just by starting an hour and a half later. Do they get more school?
So then the question I have to ask is, why are we starting school at 7:42? And why is it always some weird odd number? Right. My kid's 7:47. Like, why? It's the most weirdest thing.
Well, I think that still is going back to the old factory settings of what we're trying to say. Like we're talking about the workforce earlier. We're trying to get them back to that, But I mean, in all reality, I would much rather hire somebody who has an optimal approach of learning everything up until that point, and then hiring them and then having adjust to my standards. Vice tell him to start from my standards at the beginning, and you're literally stunting his growth. Yeah. So to go along with the whole sleep thing, there's so many more things that go along with it, and it's probably going to enhance learning. Sure. So that they also showed that when you start later in school, right, you start the time later, it cuts down their missing attendance, so they attend school more. They're more likely to graduate. It takes away from things like sleep deprivation. It drastically reduces the suicide rate amongst teens, and it also gets them away from obesity and heart problems. Sure. Which, if you think about all the times that you can optimally learn as a human being, if I'm in shape, I'm not suicidal, I don't have heart problems, I think I'm nothing more than programmed to learn from there on out.
I would think so, because I know for a fact, I've seen it. My daughter who's dyslexic cannot get up in the morning. It is just an absolute pain. And I push her because you just have to get up. But I've always thought to myself, why?
Why are we doing this? Right.
Why are we doing this? Like she does not work right now.
Right. And we have to, unfortunately, because they got to get to school.
They have to get to school. Right.
Right. And that's another thing that's like weird with regards to like school funding, because every single time a student actually misses school, the school loses out on money, and then obviously that predicates the school spending and the limits that's going on the next year. Yeah. And that kind of brings me to my next point that I do want to point out is they talk about the advantage learning between the income rates, right? So America's actually, of those 65 countries that take this PISA exam, America's actually has the highest poverty rate of all those 65 countries. 29% of American students live in poverty. right?
Wow.
And then if you look at the scores of the people that are high income and low income, it is drastically different. Now, mind you, that margin is shrinking more and more and more.
Okay.
Probably because they're like, hey, holy shit, like these rich kids are learning something these kids aren't.
Right.
Right. I mean, and it's if we've shown throughout anything, like humans in general are capable of learning all at the same rate, right?
Sure.
Just because you're born into more money doesn't mean you're more capable.
No.
It just means you have better resources.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
And I mean, I know we talked about this before. Like, I'd much rather take, a 3-3 student from Compton having absolutely zero funding than a 3-3 student from like Claremont who has all the funding in the world and all the same resources, because you got this one kid with the limited amount of resources doing the most with it. And that shows more of what he can actually
100%
do than anything else.
Yeah, and I kind of had that combo with my daughters at the same time. We're talking about wealth and how to create wealth, and just having an idea of like, not people who come from money, who use money to make more money, doesn't necessarily mean they're smart, but maybe their grandfather was. Someone did something to create the wealth, and now they're just banking on, like the Walmarts or whoever else has generational wealth in their family. And so I was explaining to them that, look, I'm not going to push you to be, a straight A student just for being a straight A student. We're going to find out what you're good at, and then whatever that is, I want to create an ability for you to succeed in that. So I said, I created Black Brew and became an entrepreneur, so you can have that opportunity. So you become the next Walmart family. So now you can hey, I just want to do this, because that's cool. It's cool. You can just wake up and like, hey, I want to be rich. You already are, but you get to be rich in the thing that's fun for you. Maybe you don't want to do the family business. You can create your own business, but you have to start somewhere. So I'm teaching them about how to be, again, like I said earlier, a business owner versus entrepreneur. Maybe I have my own little restaurant. I'm not making a chain of them, but maybe I have my own. That's a business owner. Right. And maybe that's enough for you. You pay your rent, you pay your mortgage, and you have a nice life doing what you like to do. Or maybe you want to branch out and be an entrepreneur and have several franchises, whatever that is. I feel like that's one thing kids in the inner city who are impoverished don't understand, aren't taught that, how real estate works, how making money work for you, because they don't have any. So it's like you don't have those resources to even understand that. So yes, when you see a kid who is flourishing in academics and has none of the resources to be doing that, they're doing purely off their own desire and want to and fortitude, we should be championing those kids. And I'm not saying we detract from the kids who are in the higher income areas, but again, here's another thing is, the people who are empowered, people who are of those richer families, do they really care about the kids who's impoverished? They don't. Probably don't. They probably don't. So it's got to be us voting for our city officials and putting those people in power who do care. Right. Because they're the ones who actually can make the difference. Right.
And that was the thing, right? So like schools, the way they're funded, they have like a federal, a state, and a local, which is local is driven by property tax and wherever you're at, right? And so the biggest difference between American schools and then also those other countries that we talked about is that whereas like I said, a school in Claremont and a school in Compton, because their property tax is higher over there, just going to get more local funding. And obviously, and like there's other factors to that. Like we're talking about every single time a student misses school, they definitely, or the school misses out on money. And so like, obviously the value of a student going to school is different based on income, the amount of things, everything. But to go back to my original point, so the countries, the Asian countries, that they do, they actually just spread it evenly. Every single district gets the same amount based on how many students are in each single one. Wow. So you don't have these. I mean, there's still private schools here and there, but the need for them isn't as much. Sure. Because if every single district is given the same amount of funds to work with, then that's how you differentiate the value of real professors and teachers. Because if everybody's given the same amount of resources, now when your students excel, that's a direct reflection of you. Yeah. Right. And like I said, and that's another thing, 46% of American teachers all quit within 5 years. I'm sure. And it's crazy because it's tough. But it's a broken system when the basis of our future generation learning is coming off of you're going to have to give and sacrifice. There's no other way to do it. Right. And we're not like, holy crap, you're a teacher. Oh, holy shit. That's amazing. Yeah. But all of a sudden, you get a plastic surgeon. Oh my God, you're a plastic surgeon. Yeah. Oh my God. Panties are off just for you. Yeah, exactly. But and could you imagine if we shifted, like we're talking about in this, if we shifted value to things that matter, like education. And so like all these things like debt, like, if we teach these students more and more and more about things that matter, educate them more, give them more opportunities in the future, we wouldn't have this whole income gap that we keep on having. The rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer, the middle class is getting thinner and thinner, and we're not teaching anything. Like, and in general, like, I can only imagine if you're like, for the people that are in the lower income, poverty stricken areas, their entire mindset is survival. They're not like, if the only thing into your entire life is just survival, how can you ever teach them about investing?
Yeah, that whole mindset makes no investing. I'm going to do something now that's going to affect me 15, 20 years from now.
Right.
I'm going to eat today.
Right.
They're trying to eat today.
Right.
There's no way they're thinking about anything that's 3% over how many. What? That doesn't compute.
Right.
So that's another thing, is getting people out of that whole mentality, and that's why I think you see a lot of people with issues who get money quickly. I don't know, whether it's athletes, whether it's lottery, whatever settlements, they get a bunch of money, like
they spend it all.
They spend it all because they don't have any idea what to do with that, and make 100,000, 300,000 become generational wealth. It's gone.
Right. That's another thing. Oh my God. And that's what I hate about this new generation, which I wish I keep on trying to instill into my daughters, is that like, so you see those things. I can't tell you how many times I've seen on social media, this like 15-year-old kid that has like Balenciagas on, or this like Louis V this, and then whatever this, that, and that is. And then they make middle class, or their family makes middle class money. And I'm sitting in my head like, dude, you have like 3 house payments all on your feet, on top of everything else. And it goes back into society knowing the price of everything, but the value of nothing. And I can't tell you how many times I have one of my really good friends. He's like 21 years old, and he's broke as fuck, but he knows where these Balenciaga stuff are. He knows this, this Versace, this, that. We went to a store. I've never seen the most ugly pair of shoes I've ever fucking seen.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden, and then all of a sudden he's like, but bro, I want them. I'm like, bro, you have like $1,000 in your bank account. Yeah, but those shoes are $1,000. I'm like, what? Like, how is that worth it? What's not worth it? I don't get it. Yep.
But that, again, you don't see people on, you don't see memes or Instagram posts about, Roth IRA accounts. No, there's no mutual fund memes good enough, but they'll show you a pic, of Yeezys and this, that, and the third. But like, imagine if a kid or this guy, if they bought $6,000 shoes in a year. So every other month they bought 1,000. Right. If each one of those purchases was stock.
Right.
In the same company.
Right.
To put in the same company.
Could you imagine?
Like, you could buy 10 more of those shoes if you just put $1,000 into the stock of that same company.
Right. Yep.
But no, I want the shoes on my feet. It's mind-boggling.
It's crazy. Could you imagine, again, if we invested more into education, we wouldn't have to invest and buy into those superficial shit.
Yep.
So, man.
Yeah.
Well, you guys, let me know what you guys think. Do you think the education system needs to change? Do you think that education should be good or the same? Who knows what time, or I guess we should. Yeah, let us know. I just want to know. Hope you guys have a good weekend. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to subscribe, and have a great Friday.
Later.
Peace.